They believed they were invincible. Inside the metal belly of a German tank, Tiger, Panther, Panzer IV, crews carried a quiet pride, almost arrogance. The armor around them was thick, angled, and engineered with a precision the world respected and feared. Allied soldiers whispered that German tanks were rolling fortresses, monsters of steel, demons that shrugged off bullets. But there was one truth German crews never imagined, a truth they would learn far too late. The American .50 caliber machine gun could kill them, not destroy their tank, not penetrate the turret, not crack the armor, but kill the crew inside, even without piercing steel. This story isn't about gun calibers. It's not about thickness of armor or velocity or angles. This is a story of human beings trapped inside machines they thought would protect them, only to discover those machines were coffins in disguise. It happened on a cloudy afternoon in Normandy. A Tiger tank, one of Germany's most feared weapons, sat at the edge of a hedgerow, engine off, crew resting inside. The fields were quiet, peaceful even. The crew felt safe. No artillery, no tanks nearby, no threat. Then, suddenly, the air filled with the thunder of American .50 cals, not aimed at the Tiger's armor, not meant to destroy it, but sweeping the hedgerows, bushes, and the tank itself. Inside the Tiger, panic erupted, not because the bullets could penetrate, everyone knew they couldn't, but because the sound was unlike anything they had heard. Like hammers, smashing against a metal cage, like the tank was being shaken by a giant, like death had wrapped its fists around their steel walls and started pounding. And then, the crew understood the danger. The .50 cals were striking the vision ports, the open hatches, the ventilation slits, the periscopes, the gun mantlet gaps, areas the armor did not protect. And suddenly, the Tiger wasn't a fortress. It was a prison being torn open by fire. German tankers had been taught from the beginning, your armor will keep you alive. Your tank is superior. Small arms fire cannot harm you. Every manual, every training instructor, every officer repeated the same belief. Machine guns are no threat. Only enemy tanks and anti-tank guns matter. But American .50 cals were not normal machine guns. They fired 700, 800 rounds per minute. Each round was the size of a man's finger. Each slug had the force to tear through steel plates, engine blocks, and aircraft wings. They didn't need to penetrate heavy armor. They just needed one thing: an opening. A tank is not a sealed monster. It breathes, it sees, it vents heat. It requires openings, small ones, for the crew to function. And those openings were death traps. The .50 cal could blow through driver vision slits, shatter periscopes, rip apart turret optics, punch into open hatches, ricochet inside the turret like a metal storm. And worst of all, it could kill the commander instantly if he made the mistake every German commander made, standing half out of the turret. That was standard German doctrine. Commanders had to be outside to see the battlefield, to adjust fire, to direct their driver, to spot American tanks before it was too late. But standing outside meant exposing the head, shoulders, and chest. And a .50 cal round didn't just kill, it erased. American tank crews, infantry, and recon units quickly realized something shocking. They didn't need to destroy German tanks. They just needed to blind them, deafen them, decapitate their leadership. A tank with a dead commander, a gunner who can't see, a driver who's bleeding, a loader ducking for cover, is no longer a weapon. It's a target. Many German tankers later admitted, "We feared the .50 cal more than the enemy tanks, because you never saw it coming. It was invisible. It was constant. It shook the tank like it was being smashed with iron fists." And slowly, painfully, crews realized their armor didn't save them. It trapped them. By mid-1944, German tank crews had a new nickname for the American .50 cal, Der Schwarze Tod, the Black Death. Not because it destroyed tanks, but because it killed the men inside. This fear spread quietly, whispers in the barracks, rumors between tank regiments, stories of commanders struck down instantly by a single 50 cal burst. And yet, the German high command didn't believe it. They refused to rewrite manuals. They refused to change doctrine. They refused to warn their crews. And because of that refusal, thousands of tankers discovered the truth only when it was too late. Before Normandy, before the hedgerows, before the villages turned to rubble, German tank crews had heard rumors about a strange American weapon, a machine gun so powerful it could shred aircraft, punch through trucks, tear apart walls. But they dismissed those stories. To them, the 50 caliber Browning was just a bigger gun. Louder maybe, more dramatic, sure, but not dangerous to a tank. Not to a Tiger, not to a Panther, not to the armored pride of the Reich. But war has a way of crushing illusions, and on the battlefields of France, German tank crews heard a sound that changed everything. A deep, bone-shaking roar that didn't sound like gunfire. It sounded like a thunderstorm made of metal. American tankers called it Medusa. German crews called it something else. Der Hammer Gottes, the hammer of God. Because when a 50 cal opened up, nothing felt safe. Not even inside a steel monster. German tank doctrine relied heavily on the commander's visibility. He stood half out of the turret, binoculars up, goggles on, scanning the horizon like a hunter searching for prey. He had to do this. German tanks had fewer periscopes, narrower vision ports, better guns, but worse visibility. The commander was the eyes of the machine, but to the Americans, he was a target. The moment he exposed himself, even for 1 second, crack, 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 crack. A burst from a 50 cal could end him instantly. No armor, no helmet, no doctrine could save him. And once a commander fell, the tank was blind. The crew panicked, orders stopped. The gunner hesitated, the driver froze. The loader ducked instead of loading. The tank, this mighty, terrifying machine, became an animal with its head cut off. Many captured German tankers later admitted, "We lost more tanks to panic than to fire." And nothing caused more panic than the sound of the 50 cal chewing through the air. Hollywood lies, a tank isn't airtight. It can't be. Inside every German tank were openings, necessary ones. Vision slits, periscope slots, turret gaps, engine vents, air intakes, cooling ports, machine gun ball mounts, mantlet seams, ammunition doors, escape hatches. Most were no wider than a finger, exactly the size of a 50 cal round. When American infantry or Shermans opened up with Browning 50s, those rounds didn't have to pierce armor. They only needed to find an opening, and they did. A single round through a vision slit could blind a driver. A burst into an open hatch could kill the gunner and loader instantly. A ricochet inside the turret turned steel walls into a blender. German tankers began closing every hatch, every port, every opening the moment they heard that familiar roar. But sealing the tank created another nightmare. Heat, suffocation, blindness. Without ventilation, temperatures inside reached 50, 60 degrees C. Men fainted out, eyes burned, hands blistered on hot metal. The choice was simple: open the hatches and risk the 50 cal, or close them and cook inside your own tank. It was a choice no man should ever have to make. Killing the crew wasn't the only danger. The 50 cal could disable a tank in dozens of ways. Shattering optics. A Tiger without optics might as well be blind. Destroying the commander's cupola glass, one burst turned the viewports into sparkling dust. Damaging the machine gun mount, the bowgunner became useless, breaking track links or road wheels. Heavy armor didn't protect the delicate parts. Ripping apart external fuel cans, fire hazards turned fatal. Puncturing the turret ring guards, a jammed turret meant death in a duel. Killing the infantry escort. A tank without infantry is a coffin waiting to be nailed shut. Even if the armor held, the tank became immobile, a sitting target, and American tankers knew it. Shermans didn't always need to destroy Tigers. They just needed to blind them, freeze them, or trap them. Then call in artillery, airstrikes, or a flanking shot. German tankers were disciplined, brave, skilled, but they were also human. Inside a tank, you live by sound. You trust your ears more than your eyes. And the 50 cal created a sound that bypassed logic. It punched straight into the soul. It felt like the tank was being crushed. It felt like the armor was cracking. It felt like death was clawing at the walls. A German crewman once said, "The 50 cal did not need to kill us. It only needed to remind us that we would die." Fear spread faster than fire. When a 50 cal opened up, tanks reversed. Commanders ducked, crews hesitated. A moment's hesitation on a battlefield is fatal. By the winter of 1944-45, something extraordinary happened. German armored units began issuing unofficial warnings. Do not underestimate the American heavy machine gun. But it was already too late. Thousands had learned this lesson the hard way. From Normandy to the Ardennes, from the hedgerows to the forests, German tankers entered the war believing they were invulnerable. They soon realized the tank protects the machine, but the machine does not protect the man. And the weapon that taught them this truth was the American 50 cal Browning, a weapon that didn't care about armor. Only openings, only mistakes, only fear. The desert sun dipped low, its final orange glow washing over the battlefield like a dying fire, when Hauptmann Rolf Steiner finally realized the truth. The enemy wasn't trying to pierce his armor. They were trying to blind him. For hours, his Panzer IV had taken heavy fire from American 50 caliber machine guns. At first, he laughed. His training had promised him German steel could shrug off such rounds forever. But as twilight settled, the interior of his tank felt wrong. The periscope view was cracked. The turret ring dragged every time it turned, and the radio operator kept coughing from the dust shaken loose inside the hull. This wasn't armor penetration. This was system failure. Rolf suddenly remembered the words of an old instructor at Paderborn. A tank doesn't need to be destroyed. It only needs to be blinded, trapped, or panicked. He knew, now, that the Americans understood this better than anyone. Inside the tank, Rolf shouted, "Loader! Elevate, adjust sight." But the loader didn't answer. Not because he was wounded. Not because he couldn't hear. But because he was staring, dead still, at the jammed elevation wheel. A 50 caliber bullet hadn't pierced the armor. It had hit the thin steel casing and knocked the internal gears out of alignment. The gun could still fire, but it couldn't aim. A tank with no aim was no tank at all. Outside, the Americans continued circling, like wolves testing a wounded bear. Every burst of 50 cal fire sent vibrations rattling through the chassis. Dust rained down from the weld seams. Bolts loosened. The periscope shook violently. Rolf finally understood the nightmare truth German tankers had discovered too late. The 50 cal didn't kill the tank. It killed the crew's ability to fight back. His gunner, Schultz, usually calm as stone, was losing his composure. "They're everywhere. We can't see them. Herr Hauptmann, we can't see them." Rolf grabbed him by the collar. "Steady. Listen to my voice. You're not dead. The tank still moves. We still breathe, as long as we move. We fight." But even he felt doubt sink into his bones. The turret refused to rotate smoothly. The optics were fractured. The front visor had a spiderweb pattern that distorted everything outside. To aim his cannon, he had to fire blind. The Americans weren't trying to destroy him. They were trying to force him to make a mistake. War was no longer armor versus armor. It was psychology versus psychology. Suddenly, a new vibration rocked the hull. Not from bullets, from the ground. A Sherman was approaching. Rolf squinted through the ruined periscope and froze. The Americans weren't firing their main gun. They were firing only the 50 cal on top, deliberately, methodically, relentlessly. They were shutting down his senses. How do you fight what you cannot see? How do you aim when your optics are shattered? "How do you move when your turret ring drags like rusted iron?" Rolf whispered. "Mein Gott, they're disabling us." He had been taught that American tactics were simple. Brute force, big numbers, nothing more. Now he realized how wrong that was. This wasn't brute. This was precision harassment. Hit the turret ring, hit the periscopes. Hit the commander's cupola. Shake loose every screw and bolt. Blind the commander. Break the gunner's aim. Isolate the crew in a metal coffin of noise and panic. It was warfare designed to destroy the human mind long before it destroyed the machine. Schultz screamed as another burst shattered the remaining glass in the periscope. "Sir, we need to bail. We need to get out of this coffin." Rolf slammed his fist on the turret wall. No one abandons this tank. No one. But his resolve was slipping. He knew the truth. A tank with no vision is just a steel tomb waiting to be opened. He looked at his remaining scope. Cracked, smeared with dust, vibrating every few seconds from incoming fire. They were blind. They were deaf. They were trapped. The 50 cal had done its job. Inside a tank, fear spreads fast. Faster than fire. Faster than smoke. Rolf felt it now. Not fear of bullets, but fear of helplessness. And that was exactly what the Americans wanted. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, forced himself to think. The instructors had warned them. The greatest danger to a tank crew is not the shell you hear, but the one you never see coming. He now understood that the Americans were preparing him for that unseen shot, disabling him until he had no choice but to expose himself. Step out, run, reveal his silhouette, and then the real attack would come. He had learned too late, too painfully, that the mighty German tank was never invincible. Not against steel, not against fire, but against psychology. The 50 cal was not a bullet. It was a message. You are not safe inside that armor. Night fell over the battlefield, thick, heavy, silent. But inside Rolf Steiner's Panzer IV, silence felt worse than gunfire. The 50 caliber bursts had stopped. No bullets, no shaking, no dust raining down the walls. Just an eerie, suffocating stillness. Rolf knew what that meant. The Americans weren't retreating. They weren't repositioning. They were waiting. Waiting for the moment a terrified German crew would finally crack. He whispered to himself, "Calm. Breathe. Think." But even he could feel it. The creeping sense that the tank was no longer a weapon, but a trap. Rolf's driver raised his voice, trembling. "Hauptmann, they stopped shooting." "Why would they stop?" Rolf replied quietly. "Because they don't need to shoot anymore." He had read American tactical reports, the ones commanders dismissed as clumsy Allied doctrine. But now, the truth hit him like a hammer. The 50 cal wasn't meant to destroy the tank. It was meant to set the stage for the kill. Break the optics, jam the turret ring, shatter the periscopes, rattle the crew, shake their confidence. Once the Germans lost vision, position, and nerve, the Sherman would strike. Rolf finally understood. The 50 cal didn't end the fight. It controlled the fight. And now the Americans were setting up their final move. He looked at the cracked sight. Dust-covered, crooked, useless. This wasn't what German tank doctrine had prepared them for. Their instructors had bragged about armor thickness, about penetration angles, about sloped steel. But they never warned them about this. What if the enemy targets everything around the armor? The ground vibrated again. Slow, rhythmic, deliberate tank tracks. A Sherman advancing. Rolf gripped the periscope frame. Nothing but broken glass and bent metal now. He listened. 2 seconds of rumbling. A pause. Another 2 seconds. Another pause. The Sherman was moving in short bursts, carefully, professionally. They were closing in with confidence. Because they knew the Germans couldn't see them. Rolf's heart pounded. If the Sherman got within 30 meters, it could fire point blank. No angles, No ricochets. No miracles. Just steel versus steel. "Driver," he said quietly, "prepare to reverse. Not fast, slow, quiet." The driver didn't move. "Hans," the boy finally whispered, I can't. My hands are shaking too much." That's when Rolf realized the 50 cal had done more than damage the tank. It had broken the crew. Rolf inhaled sharply. He thought about his father, a veteran of the Great War, who once told him, "A steel machine is nothing without the courage of the men inside it." Right now, his men had lost that courage. So he made a decision. Not a tactical one, not a strategic one, a human one. "We're leaving," he said quietly. "All of us." Schultz looked up, horrified. "Abandon the tank? We never abandon the tank." Rolf placed a hand on his shoulder. "Better to live than burn inside steel you cannot control." He unlocked the hatch. The night air rushed in. Cold, sharp, terrifying. He knew opening the hatch made them targets, but staying inside guaranteed death. He pushed the hatch fully open and climbed out slowly, hands raised. The crew followed, shaking, exhausted, broken. As Rolf stepped down into the dirt, he saw them. A Sherman, its silhouette visible against the horizon. The commander stood atop the turret, not firing, just watching. The 50 cal was aimed directly at them, but it didn't shoot, because the battle was already over. The Americans had used the 50 cal not as a weapon, but as a psychological scalpel. They blinded the tank, paralyzed the crew, forced them out into the open. They didn't win through penetration, they won through pressure. Rolf looked back at his tank, his pride, his steel guardian, now silent and helpless, and he whispered, "Now I understand. The 50 cal wasn't meant to kill us. It was meant to break us." The Germans learned this truth too late, too painfully, too slowly, and by the time they realized the 50 caliber was a tank killer, not by armor, but by terror, many had already paid the price.